Hello there, welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa. In the course of the hour, we'll run through the business news stories you need to know about from the continent and beyond. But first, a quick run through the markets. Another day and another record close for the JSE. The all-share hitting 68,510 points in today's session. That brings the year-to-date gains to around 15%. Almost makes you wonder where exactly this rally will plateau or fizzle out. Nigeria's main index negative on a year-to-date basis, down around 1.4% at just under 39,700 points. It's continuing a steady decline really since the start of January. MTN Nigeria did report some fairly strong results though, but it's pretty much unchanged as far as its price is concerned. The firm will be paying out at least $300 million in final dividends this particular year. Here's what's coming up tonight. Troubled waters ahead for the much-anticipated East Africa crude oil pipeline. China lays out its plans to attract a lot more foreign investment. And Zimbabwe ramps up macadamia farming in order to boost its exports. Our starting point tonight is in the world of commodities. Standard Bank has hired an independent environmental and social advisor to help assess its involvement in the construction of a $3.5 billion East African crude oil pipeline. This comes after more than 260 civil society organizations urged the CEOs of 25 banks not to participate in loans that will fund this pipeline venture. They say the project will essentially pose immense threats to local communities, water supplies and biodiversity, not just in Uganda, in Tanzania, the DRC and Kenya as well. This near 1,500-kilometer line will be the world's largest heated crude oil pipeline if built, taking over 200,000 barrels per day of crude from Hoima in western Uganda to the port of Tanga in northeastern Tanzania. A few hours ago, I spoke to Dickens Komogisha. He's the CEO of the Africa Institute for Energy Governance. I started our conversation by asking him if the communities that would be affected by the pipeline's construction had been compensated.
Many of the communities were stopped from using their land under the concept of cut-off debt. And for years now, they haven't paid them. And we've been asking, are you going to factor in the inflation? Because our money is losing value every day. But right now, the company is telling us, Total is telling us that they are going to start paying the affected people, but they are not going to factor in that inflation. Secondly, there are many things that they cannot compensate. When a community has been near the well, a community has been near a forest, a community has been near near their relatives, and you say they should leave that place. All those things are never considered in the compensation values. So we are saying that, whether you pay or you don't pay right now, the communities are the biggest losers, and the project will never make them any better.
Just to be clear, so you're saying that communities were told, look, by this date you should stop all commercial activity on specific kinds of land, and there has been absolutely no efforts to compensate people for the lost income, because I'm assuming in a lot of the places where this pipeline is passing through, these are farmers or people who are living off the land.
When the company Total completed the assessment of the properties of those affected people, they were told, don't do any more development on this land, because anytime we are going to be compensating you and you will be asked to leave. So those who had commenced building houses, who had wanted to plant trees, plant bananas that are our staple foods, they couldn't do anything. And for now, almost 3 years, they are still waiting. And we are asking for the company, are you going to reconsider the evaluations? But they are saying, no, what we assessed years back is what we are going to pay to those people, which is very unfair, which is very unjust, and it is also unlawful.
Total obviously has not responded based on what you're saying, but what about the funding side of it? Because to build this pipeline, they would have to borrow something like $2.5 billion just to get the construction on the way. What response are you getting from the banks that we understand are involved in funding this pipeline?
Of course, right now, we've been engaging with the banks, especially the ones that like Standard Bank, which have been advising the government and the companies on how to go about the financial management. No no bank has already committed the amount of money to lend for the project. But we have already written to them that considering this project is a danger to climate change, is a danger to communities, is a danger to biodiversity, we don't believe that anyone should really invest money in such a project.
Let's assume for the sake of argument that you are successful, that you get the big commercial banks, the standard banks of this world to not invest in this particular project. The Ugandan government could feasibly raise the cash through other means. They could find that $2.5 billion by, for argument's sake, raising it on the open market through a Eurobond or borrowing it domestically. What will you do then?
Of course, we are also engaging with our government, but at least we've done research. We know all the projects, even of less than $1 billion US in Uganda, they are all funded by international banks. No project of over 500 million in Uganda has ever been financed by domestic, by mobilizing finances domestically. So we know there is no way whatsoever the ECOP can be constructed without external financing. Even if you were to ask all the banks in Uganda to mobilize money, they cannot even raise $1 billion US. So we are sure it's only the international banks which are going to bring this money. And the government of Uganda has no capacity to domestically raise the money.
Dickens Komogisha there. Now, I should point out in its 2019 annual report, the French oil firm Total said it had either relocated or compensated at least 622 people in the first relocation plan for the Tilenga oil field in which it operates. Now, that, to be clear, covers a crude oil treatment plant, underground pipelines and related infrastructure. The French oil firm also reported paying about $589,000 to Uganda's government in license fees in 2019. Now, from platinum to copper to nickel, prices of industrial metals are hitting multi-year highs in the first quarter of 2021. Copper, for example, rose to over $9,400 a ton in London. That's a 9.5-year high. Prices are rising in part because of projections that a broad economic recovery from the pandemic and a worldwide push for cleaner, greener energy will unleash pent-up demand. Here's Angelo Coppola with that story.
Copper and nickel are two industrial metals to watch in this push.
There's a lot of talk at the moment about green metals. So, as the world electrifies and as we decarbonize, things like copper and nickel are going to be needed increasingly. So it looks like demand for those metals should increase over time. But I think what we need to keep in mind and just be cautious of is those metals are still very linked to GDP growth. And so it really depends on how the growth story for China and the world evolves over time.
There's a growing bullishness that has even sparked talk about a new commodity supercycle.
So we got $12 trillion of stimulus spending. That money is going just to create jobs, just to keep the economies going over. And that is leading to demand in all these commodities.
Some are suggesting that the world is in a commodity supercycle with price leaps being sustained.
And these leaps are holding on. These prices now have been going like this for over a year. And even in the 70s, they'd go out, last few months come down and go up again. But this time, that's why I say we are in a super cycle now, because they're just staying at these levels. And when they pull back, it's minuscule pullbacks, and it's for days. It's not even for weeks or months to correct.
Not everyone thinks the super cycle is sustainable for all commodities, especially for any new production coming online.
For some commodities, you have quite long lead times. And so you have situations where supply is unlikely to come into the market for a decent amount of time. For example, in platinum or PGMs, it takes roughly 7+ years for a new project to actually come into the market and start delivering production from when the project's announced. So there we would think that there's more of a chance or a higher probability of these prices being sustained for a longer period of time.
It's estimated that the platinum mines are contributing 2/3 of the revenue that the country generates from mining alone, and it couldn't have come at a better time. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Let's run through some corporate headlines. Starting in Kenya, the government has been split over plans to end Telecom Kenya's management of the state-owned near $150 million fiber optic network. It's better known by the acronym NOFB here. The telecom has been put on the spot for failing to collect up to $15.5 million in revenue due from clients using that network. Now, reports do show that Telecom Kenya also failed to give the government half of the profits raised from data service providers using the network, as stated in a now lapsed contract. MTN Nigeria reported service revenues of $3 billion for 2020, pre-tax earnings over $782 million. Now, that essentially does consolidate MTN's place as Nigeria's biggest single telecoms player. The company added 12.2 million subscribers in its last fiscal year. MTN's active data users went up by 7.4 million. That brings its number of total data users to 32.6 million. Steinhoff International is in talks with insurers to help settle lawsuits instituted against the retail group by claimants who lost money when the firm revealed massive holes in its accounts back in 2017. Now, the company says the combined claims of those who've quantified alleged damages are in excess of $9 billion. Litigation remains a significant challenge for the retailer, which has proposed a $1 billion global lawsuit settlement plan to settle about 90 separate legal claims in the Netherlands, Germany, and South Africa. And finally, in the world of transport, the Swedish automaker, now owned, of course, by Chinese firm Geely, Volvo Cars, says it's only going to be selling electric vehicles by 2030. The car maker says it will phase out all car models with internal combustion engines by then, hybrids included. It also plans to invest fairly heavily in online sales and to simplify its product portfolio. This follows growing global demand for electric cars as pressure mounts from governments and consumers to beef up their electric car plans. That's a run through your headlines. You're watching Global Business Africa. Plenty more content coming up, including this. South Africa's manufacturing activity rises to a 4-month high in February. And Uganda starts commercial exports of the popular Hass avocados. I hope you have an appetite. We'll have the details next.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay, we'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is CGTN. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back to the program. The latest ABSA Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index has increased to 53 points in February. That's up from 50.9 the month before. The most encouraging outcome of the February survey is a continued improvement in new sales orders. Here's Angela Coppola with the numbers.
The improvement was supported by better export sales compared to January, while the easing of local lockdown restrictions also contributed to an uptick in domestic demand. Only the employment index moved lower, while the supplier deliveries index also ticked down, but remained above the neutral 50-point mark.
We saw quite a broad-based improvement in manufacturing sector conditions. Output was up, new sales orders were up, inventories were up. There's a strong sense of optimism that is coming through from the manufacturing sector.
While there was improvement despite rising fuel costs in February, there's another area of concern for manufacturers, which could lead to margin squeeze.
From the 1st of April, for those manufacturers who are direct customers of Eskom, there is a 15.6% increase in tariffs that is coming through. And for those who are municipal customers, there is an 18.5% increase in tariffs coming through from the start of July. These are big increases in cost pressures in an environment where activity hasn't quite normalized as yet, in an environment where demand is still quite constrained and manufacturers are not really able to push those cost increases through to the consumers.
While purchasing managers remained relatively optimistic about the 6-month outlook, with the expectations index unchanged at 59.2 index points, some economists are cautious.
It's difficult to rule out, the possibility that we could get hit by a third wave, and especially given the fact that it's just unlikely that we're going to have most of the population inoculated quickly enough against this. So I think the risks to the recovery are still elevated, not just in the short term, but I think over the medium term as well.
There's some encouraging signs beginning to emerge about economic activity. The question now is whether it's sustainable or not. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Next door in Zimbabwe, there's been a renewed push by some tobacco farmers to limit the amount of leaf that's exported. Zimbabwe is Africa's largest grower of tobacco. In fact, it's the 6th largest in the world. The push to curb exports is driven partly by a desire to stimulate local processing and value addition. CGTN's Farai Mukhtuya has the details from Harare.
Every year, Zimbabwe grows millions of kilograms of tobacco, only 1% of which is processed locally. Some farmers' associations want the government to impose export ceilings to encourage local value addition, such as cigarette manufacturing. However, some industry experts argue it takes more than having ready access to the raw material to sustain cigarette making, and restricting exports could be futile in the short term.
We might just end up with a stockpile of unsold tobacco. I think we need more players. I think we need more brands. I mean, cigarettes are about branding. They're the easiest things in the world to make, but it's the branding that costs billions, as you know. If you look at Philip Morris, BAT, Japan Tobacco, etc., all their money is spent on branding, and if you don't have the brands, your cigarettes don't sell.
One player is leveraging Zimbabwe's biggest tourist attraction to appeal to smokers. Mosia Tunya is the indigenous name for the Victoria Falls and the brand name for these handmade cigars.
The reason why we started this venture is to contribute towards value addition.
If Zimbabwe's ambitions to process more of its own tobacco are to be realized, startups like these need more assistance.
Government can play a much more important role in trying to push the value addition, and by making information easily available, and by export support, and financial support to kind of like help small companies like ours, maybe some tax breaks and tax holidays here and there.
At a higher level, arrangements to produce cigarettes locally are being pursued with the biggest buyer of the country's tobacco.
A lot of people have been working, including cabinet ministers, have been working on trying to persuade our Chinese partners to manufacture cigarettes here. And I think the number, something, if they manufacture just 1% of their cigarettes here, it would create a ginormous industry.
In recent years, China, through Tianji, a subsidiary of the China National Tobacco Corporation, has helped expand output by financing thousands of small-scale growers. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Uganda, in the meantime, has started commercial exports of the Hass avocado. It's one of the most popular and nutritious fruits worldwide. The Hass cultivar was first grown at a large scale in the country back in 2016. CGTN's Michael Baleke explores the impact this has had on incomes and employment among rural households.
It's a plentiful harvest at Musubi Farm, the largest Hass avocado plantation in Uganda. The model farm spans over 2,500 hectares along the shores of Lake Victoria in the eastern part of the country. Musubi Farm is now producing for export.
You will not find a single fruit that combines nutrients as much as avocado does in one fruit. And being a tropical fruit, it can only grow in a specific number of countries. Yet its consumption, it cuts across the region. There's no single country under the sun that does not consume avocado.
Uganda has many avocado varieties. Most of them are sold on the local market due to their limited shelf life. But the Hass avocado variety, commonly referred to as the green gold, is the most preferred for the export market.
Hass as a variety is unique mainly because of its extended shelf life. It has the longest shelf life, and this gives it an advantage over any other variety in terms of shipment quantities, because it's one of the few varieties that we can ship by sea. Shipping by sea would give us the advantage of shipping as much as we can as compared to air freight.
Hass avocado trees mature between 2 and 3 years and have a lifespan of more than 50 years. They have a long harvest season, produce better yields, and the plant is said to be disease resilient. Avocado is a non-traditional export crop in Uganda. This means not very many farmers grow the fruit for income generation. But with the rising demand of the Hass variety worldwide, local farmers are being mobilized to open up more of their land to avocado growing. This is expected to help maintain supply to the export market, create jobs and improve incomes, especially to rural households. The government is also pushing for value addition of the crop.
We have started an agribusiness project through agriculture and trade, and we are constructing a number of value addition industries, small-scale industries, in coffee, as coffee alas, as fruit processors.
Uganda's first avocado exports are headed for Europe, but as more trees come to fruition, the country is looking to expand its avocado exports to China, India, and the Middle East. Now boasting of about 7,000 hectares, the target is to grow the number of hectares under Hass avocado to 200,000 in the next 10 years. Michael Baleke, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
On to North Africa, tourism players in Tunisia are calling for a rapid rollout of COVID-19 vaccines in order to fast-track preparations for the new tourist season after a long pandemic-induced contraction. Tunisia's tourism revenue fell by over 65% in 2020 to just about $746 million, according to official data out this week. Adin Chachi takes up the story.
Tunisian tourism minister has announced that hotels and tourist resorts are reconfiguring and ready to reopen safely after the beginning of the vaccination campaign later this month. The North African state will receive its coronavirus jabs this month after it postponed the expected start of its vaccination campaign from mid-February.
We are aware of the importance of the national vaccination campaign. It will have a direct impact on the tourism industry. The vaccine rollout will help us restart the tourism sector. We cannot save this vital industry while risking the lives of workers and tourists alike.
The Tunisian tourism minister added that tourists will stay in hotels applying the sanitary protocol. Guided tours of tourists will be allowed to visit museums and archaeological sites while respecting the health protocol.
Protecting public health is a national priority. The image of Tunisia is important. As a country which respects international standards in terms of health protocols, we are preparing our hotels, airports and tourist sites for the peak season.
The health department announced that the COVID-19 task force could lift the travel restrictions within 3 months. However, authorities urged Tunisians as well as foreign tourists to abide by preventive measures.
Yes, we're in favor of resuming normal activity, but we cannot do it without vaccination and prevention. Tunisians and foreign visitors must respect the strict health protocol. The situation is still dangerous, but we could lift travel bans if we managed to defeat the virus.
The Ministry of Health announced that the mandatory quarantine imposed by Tunisia on all travelers also applies to all people vaccinated against COVID-19, including European and international tourists.
Tourism professionals in Tunisia stressed their determination to support the efforts of the health department and to contribute to the success of the different stages of the COVID-19 vaccination campaign. Union leaders and managers are hopeful to resume a normal activity in this summer season. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Egypt expects to produce its first locally assembled electric buses before the end of 2021. Authorities say these commercial EVs will be assembled at both publicly and privately owned facilities, with the majority of inputs also made within the country. The motors and the batteries, however, well, those will have to be imported from China. From Cairo, here's CGTN's Yasser Hakim.
Egypt's plan to manufacture electric buses is on course after officials from the trade and military production ministries signed a deal that will see the first all locally assembled electric buses with China's cooperation being available before the year end. Egypt's military production ministry had earlier signed an agreement with Futon, a motor Chinese company which designs and manufactures trucks and buses and projects an output rate of 250 buses annually. It's considered a vital step in Egypt's economic development.
Our military factory is working on this very important project for the Egyptian community, the Middle East and the African continent. This project is done in conjunction with Futon Company and will be able to produce 90% of the electric buses locally within 3 years. The target is for Egypt to produce for the local market and export to neighboring countries in Africa and Middle East.
While components are to be manufactured locally, the motors and batteries will be imported from China. Infrastructure such as charging stations and maintenance are under construction. Egypt had earlier purchased 50 Chinese electric buses to be tested in Cairo streets, and the reaction has been positive.
It's equipped with all the necessary features so that the physically disabled can easily use it. The bus has a ramp and not just stairs. It is air-conditioned, extremely quiet and panoramic views. 6 cameras for the driver to monitor every angle, screens for the map and stations info. It also enables electric payment and advertisement tools. The most important thing is that it is comfortable for passengers in all weather conditions.
Delivery of the electric buses is expected to begin before the end of the year. It's part of an overall plan to adopt clean energy, such as the use of natural gas and electric energy into public transportation and private vehicles. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
It's 18:30 GMT, time for a short break. Here's what's coming up next. China lays out plans to attract more foreign investment. And Italian producers hope an EU deal with China will boost exports amidst the pandemic.
taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time, it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Over the last 14 hours of rain.
No one again began holding guns. Machine guns from police forces toward the protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time?
Not at all.
Your Excellency, thank you very much for your time now. What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Accra is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are two of the major cities I grew up in.
Business in Africa is high risk.
After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Ucheo Koronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN.
Welcome back to the program. These are some of the stories making your headlines at this hour, starting in Zimbabwe. The country's President Emerson Mnangagwa has thanked China for donating a second batch of COVID-19 vaccines. The Southern African nation received a batch of 200,000 vaccines made by Sinopharm. The Southern African country has just over 36,100 cases of COVID-19. About 1,468 people have died so far from the disease there. In the meantime, Ghana has also started its COVID vaccination program. The nation received some 600,000 doses of vaccines made by teams from AstraZeneca and Oxford University from the global COVAX vaccine sharing facility. The first phase of vaccinations will prioritize frontline health workers and high-risk populations. Nigeria's freed schoolgirls have reunited with their families after being released in the state of Zamfara. Gunmen freed all 279 girls who were kidnapped from the government girls' science secondary school in northwestern Nigeria. The Friday raid was the second such abduction in a little over a week in that part of the country. That's a run through your headlines. China's banking and investments regulator has addressed some key financial industry issues. That includes risks emerging in banking and challenges posed by the pandemic as the country further opens up for foreign investment.
China's top banking regulator says he's worried about new financial bubbles, namely property, financial capital, and foreign markets impacted by pandemic.
We do understand the US and countries in Europe, countries impacted by the pandemic, and some developing countries have implemented positive financial policies and loose monetary policies amid the pandemic. However, we need to consider the results and impacts of such measures. They do have side effects. Some of these side effects are already taking their toll.
However, for China's banking and insurance systems, the risk can be dealt with.
The size and speed of capital flowing into China is manageable. We're looking at effective measures to prevent turbulence.
National regulators are watching capital flow into the country, keeping in mind things like changing China-US relations, while looking to boost confidence among the players in the domestic market.
We are willing to work with the US. We're willing to work with American financial institutes, companies, and other interests. This is all part of the opening up of China's financial sector.
Other topics discussed include fintech and risk management amid the blind expansion of capital.
We encourage innovations. However, we require all parties in the sector to abide by the law when providing financial services. There's no exception, not even with granting loans.
While the pressure is still on amid the pandemic, officials say the country has put forth its effort to lower risks in banking and insurance systems. The adverse situation has meant opportunities to digitize financial products and services and boost accessibility to said products. The regulator says the country will also deepen reforms to the system in order to attract foreign institutes to invest in China. Chen Ziyuan, CGTN, Beijing.
Still in the country, China conducted tests of its digital currency during this year's Spring Festival. Cities like Beijing and Shenzhen handed out digital red envelopes for locals to use during the holidays. Now, these tests are broadening to more normal times and more users and to other parts of the country, including Shanghai.
Located at the number 8 entrance of the Xujiahui metro station in Shanghai, this vending machine selling food, drinks, and masks has a new addition to its usual payments options: Alipay, WeChat Pay, and Union Pay. The newcomer is the digital yuan.
The company says its vending machines are located all around in Shanghai's metro stations, but it didn't say how many of them would take payments in the digital yuan. Some larger players are also introducing the digital yuan payments in brick-and-mortar stores. With service in more than 4 million stores across China, Shanghai-based digital solutions provider Shouqianba has just started its trial of digital yuan payments in a large fashion chain store in Shenzhen. The company says it's actively preparing to use the digital currency.
We are working with licensed payment organizations and banks that are qualified to deal with the digital renminbi, so we can accept the digital currency standard. Currently, there are only a few banks and organizations in trial areas that are qualified to do so, but we want to help our vendors enhance their ability to handle the digital currency in trial areas.
The company now serves 32 million consumers a day. But the key to the promotion of the digital currency largely lies in how many people can actually have access to using it. And the trials are still limited. Chengdu issued 200,000 digital red envelopes at the end of last month, making the western city the fourth to issue digital currency, following Shenzhen, Suzhou, and Xiong'an. To many users, however, it remains an unknown quantity.
I've heard of the digital currency, but it seems like it's only available in Beijing, Shenzhen, and Suzhou and needs a special digital wallet. I've never tried it in Shanghai.
I can't tell the difference between digital currency payments and mobile payments like Alipay and WeChat Pay. Neither vendors nearby nor my friends use it.
A client manager at the Bank of Communications sent me a test site last month. I just finished my application.
Experts say that although it's a breakthrough from technology to a real application, digital yuan payments are still far from being mature enough to be accepted by the wider public.
During the last Double 11 shopping festival, the transaction numbers per second on Alipay reached a peak of 580,000, and the combined transaction numbers per second on UnionPay and NetsUnion topped 100,000. But according to the upper limit of the digital currency globally, it's designed to handle around only 50,000 transactions per second. So, though theoretically China's digital renminbi is based on blockchain technology, which is safe and reliable, in practice there are still bottlenecks in the network and computer technologies.
Professor Yan says application of digital currency payments will continue on trial in large commercial centers. It will remain limited for the sake of risk prevention. Once the technology matures, however, it's likely we'll all be seeing a lot more of the digital yuan. Zhang Shisheng, ICS for CGTN, Shanghai.
Data security and information privacy are major concerns in China. CGTN's Wu Lei spoke to a National People's Congress deputy who's fighting to make sure people's data is better protected.
Guo Bing bought an annual pass to Hangzhou Safari Park in April 2019 with his fingerprints and photo taken for admission. 6 months later, the park notified him that the old entry system had been replaced with a new one using facial recognition technology. Guo Bing became concerned it might be used to steal his identity and asked for a refund. The park refused, so Guo took the park to court in late 2019.
This is one of the key disputes. They took my personal facial data through deceptive means. The park collected my facial data without letting me know.
After a second trial in 2020, Guo Bing is still waiting to hear back on the verdict from the Hangzhou Intermediate People's Court. As an associate law professor at Zhejiang Sci-Tech University, Guo Bing is alert to controversial issues like this. But many people may not be as aware about how data is collected, used, stored, and transferred. This toilet paper machine also uses facial recognition technology to prevent waste. But in the digital age, more and more people are concerned about their privacy, so there's a message here saying it will not store any of the data it gathers. But what if someone's personal data is leaked or stolen? How can companies be supervised? And if they violate regulations, how can they be punished? Legal experts say the existing laws do not provide adequate protection for individuals. As an NPC deputy, Zhang Tianren submitted his first draft on personal data and internet information security in 2017. This year marks his third time submitting a similar draft, but with some new angles.
This year, I've added some new information on biometric data security, including facial and fingerprint info into my draft, which will cover a wider and deeper space.
Home to the highest number of internet users globally, China unveiled a draft law on personal data protection last October. It clarified the definition of sensitive private data, including race, religion, biometric, and financial information. Zhang Tianren aims to discuss this draft law with Chinese lawmakers at this year's 2 sessions, the country's annual political season that sees the national legislature and top political advisory body gather in Beijing in March.
Personal data security is closely connected to social development. Better protection of information can further boost digital technology and corporate innovation.
With the rapid growth of big data and artificial intelligence in China, people are expected to welcome new regulations that better protect their personal data and privacy. Supporters believe the law could strike a blow to those who've illegally collected and shared personal information for profit. Wu Lei, CGTN, Zhejiang Province.
On to Italy now. Producers over there are hoping that the geographical indication agreement agreed to between the EU on one hand and China on the other will boost exports and a pandemic recovery. Now, the deal formally came into effect this month. It aims to raise awareness of traditional products while protecting both producers and consumers. Hermione Kitson reports from Parma, the home of Italy's most famous ham.
Prosciutto di Parma is a jewel of the Made in Italy brand, a tradition that's been handed down for generations. For the Sassi family, production dates back 120 years.
Prosciutto di Parma is really traditional product because it's really connected with the Parma area for the special weather condition that we have in Parma.
It's one of 26 premium Italian products in a new European geographical indication agreement with China that came into effect in March.
It's a protection also not only for our producers, but also for the consumers, because they know that when they buy prosciutto di Parma, they buy the authentic one.
Other products of excellence on the list include Parmigiano Reggiano and Modena's balsamic vinegar.
A GI is more than a product, it's actually an heritage of a community.
The pigs must be bred in Italy with a specific diet, be at least 9 months old and weigh on average 170 kilos.
The skin of the prosciutto, we have the passport of every single leg that we produce, because we have the tattoo of the farm where the pig is born.
Along the production line, no additives are used.
Prosciutto di Parma is a completely natural product. The ingredient is only the Italian sea salt, Italian pork meat, thyme and love.
After being cured for at least 12 months, each prosciutto undergoes rigorous checks before being given the crown of approval.
So this is the guarantee of authenticity of Parma ham.
Italy started exporting prosciutto di Parma to China 10 years ago. Since then, it's become the second biggest market in Asia, with 25,000 hams sent there each year.
It's a lot fewer than the 600,000 exported to the US each year, but the Chinese market can't be underestimated.
I think the Chinese market have a very big potential because the Chinese customer, they have a very important knowledge how to consume pork meat.
Producers are confident that slowly but surely this GI agreement with China will boost exports and help in the country's pandemic recovery. Hermione Kitson, CGTN, Parma.
A quick run through the commodity prices. So mining stocks at the JSE have had a very good run so far this year. They continue to ride the wave of gains from high dollar prices for industrial metals and a weaker rand, as you're going to see in another 10 minutes or so. Platinum miners over 3% higher. Anglo-American, BHP Billiton are all closing much higher today, 1.9%, 2.38% higher. Spot platinum prices did start the day on a relatively weak note, but they did claw back early losses to hit about $1,207 an ounce. Here's what's coming up next. Zimbabwe ramps up macadamia farming in order to boost exports. And the Toyota Yaris is the 2021 car of the year. We'll explore why next.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography. And a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg, Ethiopia,
Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back. Zimbabwe aims to increase its macadamia nut output by encouraging communal farmers to grow a crop whose production so far has been dominated by large commercial farms. CGTN's Farai Mokotuya reports from Chipinge district in the eastern highlands of Zimbabwe on grassroots.
James Maisiri planted these macadamia trees in 2004 after being allocated a farm during the land reform program. He's now encouraging other black farmers to take up the crop despite the prohibitive startup costs.
Truly speaking, the seedling of macadamia is very expensive. Then the inputs as well, they are very expensive. But as you start producing, I think the 5th year, that's when you return your expenses. The markets are ready, are there. And imagine on the world market, South Africa, which is producing the largest quantity, they are producing at 25% of what is needed on the world market.
Production is dominated by large commercial plantations, but inclusive financing models are increasing participation.
We want to rope in small-scale farmers who are incapacitated, who can't start their own plantations. So we wanted to help them. We wanted to design a program whereby we have a partnership of profit sharing at the end, but we will help them to start their own plantations at zero cost.
Robert Nyemba has heeded the call to grow the crop, turning a large residential stand into a peri-urban plantation. He's expecting his first harvest this year.
Maybe around a ton. For me, that would be a super achievement. After 4 years, you get even something big. To me, that's the start. Hopefully, it's the start of bigger things to come. I think there's huge potential. Yet, I think the fact that you can go for 4 years without getting anything back discourages quite a number of our farmers or potential farmers. It's a long time. 4 years is a very long time. But then the attraction of it being in demand should spur everyone.
Farmers here have coined a name for the macadamia nut. They call it Zimbabwe's brown gold, a moniker they hope will spur this crop to emulate the foreign currency generating capacity of the actual precious metal. Indications are promising.
In the next 3 to 4 years, the country can surpass the $30 million revenue, and maybe in the next 10 or so years, it can actually surpass around 50 million. because the potential is there. The various producers, the consolidators, value add, as well as processors, are now moving from actually exporting the nut and shell and are beginning to value add a little bit, cracking the nut, drying it.
Zimbabwe's Trade Promotion Agency is also trying to improve quality through capacity building training for extension officers. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Chipinge, Zimbabwe.
Let's wrap up with a story out of the car world. The Toyota Yaris has been named as the 2021 Car of the Year. The fourth generation petrol-electric hybrid beat off competition from 6 other challengers at an event in Geneva on Monday. Now, the announcement came on what should have been the eve of the Geneva International Motor Show, which usually happens in March. But of course, due to the pandemic, the show has been cancelled for the second year in a row. The runner-up was a Fiat 500 electric. The Cupra Formentor crossover came in third. A first-generation Yaris was named as Car of the Year all the way back in the year 2000.
The Toyota Yaris is one of the 7 finalists for the Car of the Year 2021. I'm driving it on some typical Dutch B-roads. They're twisty, they're narrow, they're bumpy, and therefore perfect to test the suspension of this 4th generation Yaris. It's more fun to drive, better steering, and more responsive handling. The strength is its versatility. 3 body styles, different drivetrains, a lot of safety systems. So the total package is the reason why the Yaris is one of the 7 finalists.
Quick update on currencies as we wrap up the program. You might have noticed a gradual weakening of the Naira. It's not just the Naira, though, that's been making a slow devaluation in anything but name. Ethiopia's currency, the birr, has also been doing pretty much the exact same thing. It ceded about 4% to the American dollar so far this year on the formal market. The devaluation has been gradual but consistent. If you look at last year's data, the birr ended 2020 about 20.6% weaker in that period of time. Those are your currencies, and that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. As always, we'd like to hear your thoughts on the program and the content you've seen here in the last hour or so. Many ways to get your thoughts back to us, all of them on your screens right now. I'm Ramanyang in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Thank you for your company in the last hour. The World Today is up next from Washington, D.C.